point, it's a type 3 team, commensurate with the complexity of this fire. We're going to be transitioning to a type 4 team. Beyond that, I want to thank those who have actively participated in addressing this fire, those in the Forest Service, as well as all the resources that showed up on scene. There's local resources there, Leadville Lake County Fire resources, as well as off-unit resources that have been out there, and we still have some resources out on the ground right now, hopefully staying dry. So yeah, to start with, I think I can probably provide some of the background information that has been provided each day, and I don't know how familiar everybody is, so I'm just going to start there. The fire is 133 acres. It's perched on the way to La Plata Peak off the La Plata Peak Trail, which is just up 82 and south of 82 on your way to Indy Pass. Fuel type up there is mixed conifer. It's spruce, and so it's a different fuel type than what we've seen recently burn around here as much. Interlocking was primarily lodgepole involved. There's some mixed con there. So fire's at 11,000 plus feet, and it's 2 hours into the fire by foot. And so it's inaccessible, or not easily accessible, put it that way. It's non-traditional, I would call it, just in terms of where it is, because it's in an out-of-the-way place. It's relatively small, wildfire speaking, at 133 acres compared to a lot of the other fires that you see on the news. But what it is it's complex. It's got there's details that matter with where this fire is and what it's taking to address it and engage it. We have engaged it at the current fire perimeter, with the resources that have been here and some that are still here. The perimeter is a combination of a bench area on the ridge and ties into like a scree that's coming down the slope on one side, and then it sort of wraps around on the north side of the fire, west side of the fire rather. Take that back. The east side of the fire, tying back into another steep drainage there. So the fire perimeter has been set the way it is for the past 3 days, unless I'm mistaken, and maybe even 4. The rain, the first rain we had, the real heavy one, basically did its job to park the fire where it is, severely limit fire behavior. Okay. In advance of that, we had direct engagement with that fire, with a hotshot crew and a couple other crews up there, including Tig, who was up there as well on day 1. So right now, because of all the rain we've had, and the fact that the aerial resources are not real capable of flying in this kind of stuff and engaging it too, and also because of the fact that we've gotten so much rain, it's very difficult to get up there right now, and the fire is where it is, so it's not growing. So we've taken a step back from the direct engagement approach, and that's one part of the story. The other part of the story is the environment up there is sort of fraught with risk. It's an area of high snag density, not only standing snags. I don't know which ones were and weren't maybe involved in the fire within the fire perimeter, but then you also have burned snags, and burned snags obviously more likely to fall than not burned snags in some cases. Then you have water that kind of compromises those as well, and then you have the footing, and that trail footing and this trail steepness is pretty significant. And then you have firefighters, in some cases, if we wanted to march them up that hill, they're carrying their packs and their saws and that sort of thing. It's not a great environment to engage in. And so we're stepping back and looking at at what's possible for this fire now, given all the safety issues. One of the things that we were reliant upon, and to a large degree, in order to get somebody off the hill if they were injured, was that aerial resources, aerial extraction. There's only certain helicopters that can fly the way that we need them to, especially at those elevations too. So that was a complicating factor. There's something called the golden hour, and I'm sure Ty could speak to it better than me, but it's basically like that hour in which, if you are severely injured, like everything matters within that hour. And that golden hour, in certain cases, wasn't achievable. And so if something significant happened, we were going to have significant issues associated, or whoever was injured might be severely compromised. So there's that. We had, so long evacuation times, and different locations of people on the fire as well. So evacuation times differ because of that. So all of these factors together, the weather, the reduced fire behavior within the perimeter, the footing conditions, the snag environment, all those things cause us to basically say, okay, we need to reassess while this is basically in a pause mode due to weather, and find a way to engage it in a different way and really check that fire behavior and see what it's doing. So we have rain and incoming weather daily. That's sort of promoting
Can
this.
someone let Chris back in? He got kicked out.
Oh, okay.
Thanks. Sorry to interrupt.
That's all right. Thanks. Yeah, Chris will cover the same stuff to a large degree as well, or can. So that's also hampering our ability, again, to keep going after. No aviation support because it's not going to be flying right now, and it's raining. So, and then again, worsening or not improving anyway, trail conditions continuing. Okay. So that's the background. That's kind of the context for what this is, where it is, and some of the conditions. What is true also is that there are still smoldering things within that fire perimeter. And it differs from other maybe roadside fires that you can't address all of those things because of that environment, and the fuel's there too, and others can speak better to this than myself. But the fuel's there too, especially the heavy fuels, the biggest fuels in there. They burn for a long time, and they don't go out easily, despite what would be, I think, at least an inch and a half, maybe even more at this point now, given the weather, of rain. So it would actually take inches and inches of rain to put out the entire fire. So that's in context as well.
Excuse me, were we able to get Chris back on?
He hasn't tried to get back in. I sent him the meeting link via email.
Thank you.
So it's going to almost need to smolder out for quite a while. And the hope is that we continue to get favorable weather conditions that allow that to happen in a manner that avoids another flare up, I guess.
Yeah, so drying conditions are what we're really looking at, because any drying will increase the fire behavior. And if fire behavior is increasing that fuel type, then there's more potential of it doing something where we don't want it to do that. And so right now it's all within the perimeter, but what we do have is some tools available to us to help us see what it's doing. Some of those are remote. We have a UAS, unmanned aerial system, that can fly over that fire and detect the heat with an infrared camera. So we can see what those changes are. Periodically see what those changes are. So that's one way to do it. What we've requested too is assistance from a group called COTAC, which is an enterprise group out of DFPC, is the ability to use some cameras to monitor. So it's like 24/7. You don't have to have the drone up to see exactly what the fire is doing, or at least part of what the fire is doing, plus the human intelligence that we get out there as well. So people on the ground, which I trust more than anything else personally, but all those things complement each other. The other thing that we have is predictive. So certain things are predictive of what might happen for fire behavior. They're indicators. Fuel moistures are indicators. So how quickly things are drying out.
Chris is back. If you want to talk about that.
Yeah, Chris, I don't know how much of that you got or missed. And I don't want to stray off path here, but Andy Lee was just asking about really what the fire is doing and what it sort of needs to do, I guess, ideally within the perimeter to have maybe less concern, or
Yeah,
did you categorize that?
what are we looking at moving forward? I imagine some of the spruce are going to be more old growth and bigger trunk circumference, and they're going to need a while to burn out. So I imagine what Pat was just alluding to is that we're pretty much in an observation phase and hoping for better, hoping the weather cooperates. Anything outside of a major drying period, then it sounds like we're just letting this smolder out and hoping for no flare-ups. Is that about where we're at with moving forward on this?
Yeah, so fire behavior as we move forward, we got a couple of things going. So one is right now the live fuel moistures. So that's the moisture that the live plants like the spruce are currently pulling. It's at the highest it's been all year. So those larger trees are pretty full of moisture. Being that we're just kind of late in the year, they turn on a little later, and so they're fully drawing right now. So some of our fuel samples in the area, not in spruce, but like in the lodge pull, are showing it at like 127% right now. One thing to remember is when we're talking about plants, a plant cell can expand, so a plant can actually get to like 300% of moisture to be like completely full of water. For us up here, when the spruce and like the lodge pole is dormant, it's probably in the upper 80s. So like I say, we're at 127 right now. So that tells me that the live fuels are pretty good up there right now. I think that's also part of why we didn't see some of the fire growth we saw, is because the trees were somewhat resistant to torching. But what we had going on and what the primary driver of the fire was the dead and down component. And so, it was moderate to heavy in places up there is the best reports that I got. And so when we talk 1,000-hour fuels, we're looking at a 6-inch diameter log. And so if we were to get lumber at a lumber yard, those things are coming out of a kiln dried at like 12 to 11%. We were averaging 9 to 10% up there, when the fire started. So what that means is that those logs were pretty available, and that's what we saw as the primary driver of the fire. Is that it kind of crept through some needle litter, got into some logs and some patches of dead and down. It was able to build some heat. That heat then pre-dried the trees, above it, and then eventually they would torch. Then they throw spots and move out, it moves around, and then that kind of cycle begins as those spots land back in those heavy logs. They then catch them on fire. They start to build some heat and energy. And so that's why we saw like the pulses or the waves of, the fire spread going uphill with some of the torching we had. And eventually, like in the first operational period when it made kind of the biggest run, that was like the middle burned out of 2 flanks of the fire. And so pretty normal for that kind of fuel type. It doesn't tend to burn very clean. Like, if you think like a field of grass burning, it's got a pretty good, clean, consistent edge. Unfortunately, spruce does not have that because of the nature and how it spreads through spotting. So what we need to see happen up there is ideally we need to see those 1,000-hour fuels. We call it a 1,000-hour fuel just in case folks don't know, because it takes 1,000 hours to go from saturated to dry. We also have 100-hour and 10-hour fuels. And so, 1,000-hour fuel is going to be like 6 inches in diameter, A 10-hour is, roughly, inch and a half in diameter. Sorry, that's 100. And then a 10-hour is kind of like a pencil, if you think kind of those thicknesses. So what we need are those thousands in particular to draw this moisture. So we need the moisture to sit there. We call that residence time, how long that moisture can kind of sit on those fuels and soak in. And that's going to change those 1,000 hours to hopefully make them less available. Sometimes when you get a lot of moisture really quickly, it doesn't have as long to soak in. I have a feeling that the 10s and 100 hours are probably changing significantly, but the 1,000 hours are the big concern because, you think about it, it's a log laying on the ground. Maybe the top side of the log is getting wet, but the bottom side may not. So we need enough moisture up there that it actually saturates the ground to the point where the whole log is starting to draw moisture, which then helps make it unavailable. And then that's going to slow the fire growth because then it'll keep the fire from being able to get into the ladder fuels or up into the trees. And that's kind of more how it spreads. Spruce typically kind of just creeps around. It tends to have a very dense needle litter. And so if you think more like a piece of paper burning versus like a cigar, that spruce fuel bed is the needles are more like a cigar. So it kind of tends to smolder and go slowly until it gets into something else where it can kind of pick up. So, we need a lot of moisture up there in the near term to really saturate things. And then we need that moisture to stick around for a little while. And that's going to be the biggest thing that's going to affect the fire. Does that make sense?
Yeah, actually, that eliminates a lot of stuff that I wasn't clear on before. So thanks for breaking down the 1,000 hour versus 100 hour, 10 hour. That's extremely helpful.
Yeah, if you all want to be further illuminated, last year we did a stakeholder meeting at Station 2, and Chris spoke there about what happened at Interlochen, and it's one of the most well explained sort of basic presentations on how fire moves through that landscape and within that ecosystem. So it's good stuff. Anyway, thanks, Chris, for that explanation. So with what he said too, I mean, it's like if you need that residence time, in a lot of cases, you might not get the amount of precip necessary, steady, sustained over time, so they can really soak those soils. So the one thing that does provide that we do get around here is snow, and a lot of snow would do the trick out there, but still, could be some time away.
It was almost September, so
I know
it also is possible.
We're all thinking about that. I know as we see summer fade away.
Yeah.
But that's really like if unless we get continued sustained rain, I suspect we'll probably see some smoking up there from that ridge, and could cause some concern. But that's exactly why we're continuing to assess it, and we are engaging it where we can. So right now, because we can't be up on the ridge, we're doing some things elsewhere to try to prep for potentially that fire leaving the perimeter if it did that. So those are the plans that we're really looking at, trying to put in place as we speak, because we still have aerial resources and ground resources out there. We don't have the same organizational apparatus as we did because the Type 3 team, they're meant to support evolving and larger incidents. And once that precip hit and the conditions changed to what they did out there, they basically are, they transfer back to the next type of team, which is type 4 or type 4 incident command. And so we have that transition happening tomorrow.
What do the participant numbers look like? I think we were up to like 130 or something at one point, and type 4 will bring us down to maybe a dozen or a few dozen or.
Yeah, it's probably going to be, all things told, tomorrow. We're getting in, we anticipate anyway, and I don't know if anybody else heard about this, a suppression module. It's coming in, which is like basically a half of a hand crew size. So hand crews are 20, modules would be 10. So them plus a few of the other folks out there, I'm guessing we're in a 25 to 30 ballpark.
Okay.
That does not include, other responders
Mhm.
within the area too, whether that be anyone like Lake County related, anybody Chafee related. Obviously, there's this whole supplementation. Most of those folks, if they're not involved with the incident, they have their own initial attack responsibilities, so we don't count them.
I hate saying this about every fire that we have, but like with Interlake, and it was like so early in the season, it was like all hands on deck. Everyone was kind of chomping at the bit. It was the timing was, we were real lucky. With this, it's almost like the terrain seems like we're pretty lucky because I think on that west side, it looks like there's a creek there that's readily available to keep, to be used, I guess, as a tool to draw water from. On the south side, we got the scree field. Then you're like almost getting to tree line. There's nothing else to burn up above it. To the east, it looks concerning because there's a whole nother valley it could drop into, I think. And then to the west, it's like how likely are they to spread downhill? I just, I'm new to all this, so some of my questions might be kind of basic or silly or whatever, but it seems like we kind of got lucky with where this is at too, from what I'm seeing.
I think you're pretty correct, and it is boxed in, so to speak, on a couple of sides, like the south end and a little bit on the west end, but not the entire west end is boxed in at this point. So there's still some remaining heat. And if the general wind direction in that drainage, if it were to kick up, it would want to spread more to the east, downhill and east.
Okay.
Is the only real place it kind of has to go. It could go west too. But we are preparing some contingency lines at the base of the hill and utilizing roads as line, things like that, a creek as a line, like you mentioned. So even though you say you're new to it, you're already kind of picking up on kind of how it works. So,
Hey, yeah, sorry to, hey, we got to get back to budget hearings, but thanks for the update. Good work on that one. Let us know if anything changes.
All right. Thanks, PT.
Thanks, Dave, PT, and Gina for joining us.
Carl,
You bet.
did you want to? So I'm what's known as the agency administrator trainee for incidents like wildfires, right? And so I'm working under Carl as the qualified agency administrator, and we basically work in tandem with the incident command team. The team effectively works for the agency administrator to protect the values at risk. That's what the team's here for. And so that's really the goals of this fire, to do that to the extent possible and practical. So, Carl, I want to open the floor to you.
Okay. Thank you for letting us take some of your time and try to explain some of this. That's one of the hardest things, I think, for the Forest Service in my career has been trying to tell our stories. So we appreciate the opportunity. Values at risk, that was one of the things that on day one we were trying to analyze for. And we brought people together, and landowners and the public and locals, and trying to get our heads wrapped around that and trying to convey those values at risk to the incoming team. So we spent a bit of time on that, obviously. And, for me, it's risk work versus reward all the time. It's like we're putting a lot of people on top of the mountain there and trying to put them in a precarious situation. And we do that on purpose, very deliberately. We have safety officers, very highly skilled employees that have done similar things. And we develop a plan together, and that's how these teams work. They're very professional and very methodical. And we try to make the best decisions with what we have. And that risk is always a discussion point, is what are we trying to do? And is it really worth putting people's lives, people's health at risk? So the first couple of days, we were trying to make sure we had the foundation set so that if we had a health emergency, we would have opportunities to address that and get people off the mountain safely. And that golden hour we talked about earlier was at our forefront of our minds. So, yeah, communications, trying to move people, injure people in that terrain is just very difficult and exhausting for the people who are trying to do that work. So, yeah, having the right resources and in the weather, trying to play that factor is always a challenge. I told people this morning that even though it's 133 acres, this has been a very challenging and thought-provoking fire. We've had a lot of people put great minds in trying to come up with the right decisions and the right time to do things. So, yeah. And the last thing is, you know, we're not, as Pat said, we're going to continue to monitor this through technology and through, more importantly, in my opinion, boots on the ground and having experienced people on the fire when appropriate to see if fire behavior changes. And if it does, we'll know about it and we'll take appropriate action at that point, and we'll gear back up if necessary. So, yeah, that's something we take seriously. We're very deliberate, and yeah, we're not done with this fire by any means. So, yeah.
That's how the incident command system works. Like you scale down if, as needed, scale up if needed. And so those options are always available to order resources. And the resources aren't infinite in terms of like what you can get at what time, of course. You know, there's some limited availability, but we would order up what's needed with a good chance of success in getting it. But yeah, it's dependent on what's going on elsewhere too.
Yeah.
On that note, I know several other big significant fires going on in the state. Are those all of those on Forest Service land, or how much of a drawl are you guys getting, or a request basically like, hey, we need the people who are on La Plata somewhere else right now?
So we have a pretty extensive, again, statewide and even nationwide, very extensive, complex ordering system and dispatch system. And we make our requests through the team, and it gets prioritized at different levels depending on, like you said, just the risk involved and the level of activity on some of these other fires. I couldn't speak to the specifics of any other fire in this state right now.
Okay.
But we have people looking at that and coordinating those type of things way above my head.
Okay.
We did, I mean, there's an example though, where we had a helicopter that we were really heavily reliant upon for our operations. And again, you know, when at a national level is how some of this stuff is even playing out, to where something else was going on and that helicopter got remobilized in a different area that, you know, through some level of conversation of what was going on there versus what was going on here, that's where it was needed. So those things do happen. Chris, can you speak at all to the rest of the like PL levels, you know, just elsewhere versus here?
Yeah, wrong button there for a second. So real quick, so the way that resources are allocated is there's a geographic, it's called a GAC. So it's a geographic area where they assign resources, and then there's a MAC, and that's a multi-geographic area. And so when we get into preparedness level 4 and 5 nationally, it's usually the MAC that is allocating the resources. So that's a national level of allocation. So what happens is we place an order to Pueblo Dispatch. Pueblo Dispatch will then elevate that, which then goes to the GAC, our geographic area. Those orders are then filtered out, and a lot of times the MAC will give the GAC a certain level of authority to assign those resources. But sometimes they say, no, that resource is going to be better utilized here. And that is based on values at risk. And typically that's going to be critical infrastructure is going to be the number one value. And then a lot of times, well, I mean, life is always number one, but then below that, it's going to be your critical infrastructure. So like, hydroelectric plants, major power lines, oil refineries, that kind of stuff. And then it gets down into like communities and things like that. So that's kind of how the resources are assigned. So currently anything that we order from Pueblo gets run through a whole bunch of other different people. And they determine the priority. And that's what Pat's talking about with like the hoist ship we had. It was determined that that was going to be better utilized somewhere else with higher values at risk. Sorry, what was the second part of that, Pat?
Planning levels.
Oh,
And
yeah.
What each region is in.
So we have 1 through 5 planning levels, 5 being the worst, 1 being the lowest. Currently, region 2, which is the region we are in, or the Rocky Mountain area, that is at a PL3. The majority of regions around the country are in PL3, but because so many are in PL3 nationally, we are in a PL4. And then anytime we get into PL4 or 5, there tends to be scarcity of resources, and that's where that prioritization process begins.
So to add to the conversation just a little bit, some of the other things we're thinking about are somewhat crystal ball, right? But it still does help inform what we know, or what we would like to know, maybe is a better way to say it, about things that may impact fire behavior in the future. And I hope someone can speak to like long-term weather forecasts, as well as a modeling that we use called FS Pro, which takes a lot of different factors into account.
That's Chris.
Okay, Chris, back to you.
He's there.
Okay, yeah. So Pat alluded to FS Pro, which is a program that takes some kind of previous data, current data, and then the forecast, and then models, potential fire behavior and puts out probabilities. So that's something that we kind of use to help us make the decisions. And we also have a thing called WOFDIS, or Wildfire Decision Support Software. So that's where we identify all our values at risk and all this kind of stuff, and we put that all in there, and that helps us make and then document some decisions. But overall, this has been a very interesting year weather-wise. We have been in high fire danger, pretty much most of the summer, and every time we get close to being into like very high fire danger. And then we talk also about the ERC, which is energy release component. And that is basically kind of trying to quantify how much energy would be released from a fire should we have one. And that directly ties into difficulty of suppression. So the more energy that's released, higher the ERC, the harder it's going to be to put out. So all summer up here, we actually were hurting for some moisture, coming into the spring, but then we got some late storms. The Upper Arkansas River Valley went from like 80% snowpack up to 140. That kind of really helped us kind of slow things down, prolong some things, added some moisture for the plants to kind of get into, earlier in the spring. We had a relatively good green up. And then we kind of started a drying trend, right? And so normally up here, around 4th of July, the monsoon would set up. Hopefully that's going to provide us the much needed moisture that kind of prolongs and slows our fire season. That kind of happened, kind of didn't happen this year. What we saw is we would get a week of wet and then like 10 days or so of drying, then another 3-4 days of wet, and then, some more drying. So our ERC never went above the 90th percentile, and we never quite got into very high fire danger. And so kind of those are also some of the criteria we look at for when we look at restrictions. So that was just kind of bouncing along, kind of just below very high all summer for us up here. When we look at the bigger picture, there's some models that are produced, look at like 120 days out in terms of fire behavior and some of that stuff. Overall, what we're showing is the model is showing that we are going to be above average temperatures, but possibly an equal chance for moisture, is the last one I saw. So again, that means hotter, potentially equivalent moisture to we would consider average or normal for the time of year. I would say this current push we're having right now would be considered kind of late for monsoons. This is typically when we start to go into what people would refer as like the Indian summer, or we start to get into fall, where it's 70s and sunny, and it's a great time to go ride your bike or do fun things outside. So this is kind of a blessing in disguise in some ways, in terms of this round of moisture. I'm looking at some models that are showing possibly a couple more days of moisture, then it's a little bit of drying, and then maybe some more moisture. So we'll just kind of have to see how all that plays out. But overall, historically, September and October tend to be drier months for us, and then maybe later in October, we start to get some snow, and particularly up high or higher, since you guys are in Leadville. So that would be kind of what we would expect to see. So I would expect, unless something is drastically different based off how kind of weird climate's been this summer, that we would be going into more of a probably a warming and drying trend, outside of these weird little kind of late season monsoonal bursts, or if for some reason winter storms start to set up. That's kind of what I'm seeing looking out, like the next 3 months. Any questions on that?
Yeah, we're always seem to be talking about the moisture, and I understand that that's the most important component, but how big of a factor are the ambient temperatures? Like, is it just at a point where it gets cold enough that it really hinders any spread?
Yes. So the big couple of other things that are really important in terms of limiting fire spread we haven't really talked about. One is going to be humidity recovery. So one thing we've seen up here in the Upper Arkansas River Valley is that with all our large fires, so like Decker, Hayden, Twin Lakes to some extent, we have nighttime RHs that don't get much above like 20-30%. Lately here this summer, and one thing that's also been keeping that ERC down, and keeping us out of that very high fire danger, is we've had really good humidity recovery all year. We've been in the 50 to like 100%, and you all have actually really been more like in the 70 to 100%, for like the last month up there. So that really is good. And so when we talked about that residence time of the moisture in those fuels and how it soaks in, hot, dry days are gonna suck that moisture off and evaporate it more quickly, put it into the atmosphere, but then it's not going like into the fuels as much. So like if we get, a few days of rain here, let's say we end up with 1.5 inches of rain up on the fire, which I think is likely, hopefully a little more. But then it stays like cloudy and cool for a week. That's going to give that moisture the time to soak in that we need. And that's what I'm talking about really when I mentioned like the residence time and that being able to soak in and affect those fuels. If we get 1 inch of rain today and tomorrow it's sunny, windy, and 90, we're going to see little to no moisture effect from that, even though it was like 1 inch of rain.
I think that's all the questions I have.
All right, keep them coming. I like talking fire.
I have a question about the science, and without asking anybody to be political, have you all noticed any difference in the resources available to aspire the changes to the Forest Service?
It's probably fairly average at a PL4 when your resources and they get pulled away before they get to the fire or they get pulled off your fire. So might be a little less, but it's hard to quantify that. Yeah.
The Pikes on Isabel National Forest was staffed at 100% for initial attack resources this year.
So, should we need more resources for this? Because we see that we need to engage it differently. We'll be making those requests, and then but there are these variables out there, and I don't know whether it's capacity, available capacity, or if it's just they're just being used and it's widespread.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But as needed, we'll request the resources. We will get some fills. I mean, we were getting some fills at this incident too. And so, but it's all going to be based upon the fire behavior.
Yeah.
And also what else is going on elsewhere.
Totally.
But the public, like I mentioned, they're likely to see smoke. And so there may be some concern. We are staffing this fire. We are engaged with this fire.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be just, I think, the take home from my perspective, to share with the public that this thing isn't being let go up there. I mean, actively assessing it. And we're using a lot of tools to do that and a lot of expertise too. So, however you can share that with whoever might ask about it, we appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, that was my next question is what can we do on our end to, for public outreach, just letting the people know what, messaging wise, what is ideal for you guys to see coming from the county.
Yeah, Lawrence has been doing this for a little while, and I think he could speak to that. I've been working with him quite a bit to try to get some information out. He's our primary source right now.
Yes, hello again. So there are bulletin boards at the Twin Lakes Visitor Center and also at the district office, and that's where we plan to post information as conditions change and as warranted. We will, and based on the forecast, we're going to have some moisture through the next 48 hours. Once it starts to get hotter and drier and folks start to see smoke, that's when the calls and the concerns start to increase. At that point, we'll put out another update to let folks know what we're doing and why, and that it's still being staffed and we're still suppressing it. And after that point, we will issue updates as warranted. The IncyWeb site, which is a dedicated web page for this fire, is active and will remain active. We've been training the public through the past week to go there for information. And we're also going to be utilizing our primary Facebook and X accounts and our email distribution lists when we get to that point where we feel that conditions have changed and we need to put something out. At that moment in time, we have been engaging with the county PIOs on both counties. We've been coordinating and we have been having calls, and we have a structure in place to ensure that once that information is released, that it gets amplified across your platforms. In the interim, there will be a phone number on IncyWeb. So if folks have a concern, that phone number is live and it will be staffed, and someone will be available to answer any questions that folks may have during this time where it's all dependent on conditions.
One of the other things on that point too, sorry, Lawrence, I don't mean to cut you off.
I was going to say, and if your constituents are calling and sharing concerns, and you feel that we need to increase or modify the cadence of the information release, please let us know. We're in this together.
that's an excellent segue.
Thank you.
In it together. So one of the other things is, we can do a lot of work out there with the crews that we have in terms of, prepping holding line, which is currently what's happening. Prepping holding line, and it takes some sweat equity to do that. They're doing it. The thing that I would love to see continue and encourage to the extent possible is to continue to have private landowners take responsibility for their property too, in terms of defensible space and doing what they can on their side of the fence too. It makes a big difference for a home that's prepped, and if you get a bunch of people teaming up together in the same area, it makes it that much better for them. I know there's opportunities and initiatives that we've talked about. We've had community events to try to help encourage people to do those things, provide the value of it, and those go a long way. And especially when the fire's on the hill, because when it's behind you or when it's like on your doorstep, if you will, you can't really do a whole lot then. So I would just say continue to encourage and support those events to the extent possible, so that people can do what they need to do on their side too.
Would you say that Harmony Jump is a good partner in helping with that? Or can you name some of the folks already working on that in this community so we know specifically who we can support?
Yeah, well, there's several. I mean, this will get into a little bit of the Forest Service, but Colorado State Forest Service, does have this service foresters do evaluations, but then there's also they can do some treatments and provide some, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, some match treatments for those sorts of things. There's also Arwick is also working to do some of that. Team Rubicon is another group that I think has done some thinning and work maybe just on county lands.
I meant more like who's got good networking with the private landowners. I understand who's doing the work.
Harmony's a good primary with that, because she's already tied in through the Forest Health Council.
Right.
And we meet regularly to try to leverage each other's capacity. Right. So I think that's still the avenue.
Okay, great.
And she's also being apprised of those different funding opportunities as well through that. So that's where we kind of put everything on the table and say what might we do in this one area, what might we do collectively, in a larger area to work together to get these things done and have a bigger impact at scale. So I think it's the right spot.
Along those lines, my experience on the Front Range is homeowners actually, or homeowner insurance is going higher. And as people work on their private property and some of the things that we've done on the Forest Service along the Front Range on Pikes Peak Ranger District specifically, I've been told, I don't know the data exactly, but firefighters who lived in some of these woolly areas they've lost their homeowners insurance. They've done projects on their private property, as well as we've done projects adjacent to this private property, and they've been able to regain reasonable homeowners insurance coverage again. So I've been told.
Okay.
But that's something that's pretty important for folks.
Another reason.
That's a key part. I wish we could get to. I mean, not that just protecting your home isn't enough incentive, but maybe there's some other incentive, and that's a bigger thing with the insurance. And but understanding what it might take to move that needle would be helpful too. I think it would be illuminating for a homeowner to understand what that looks like. How much work would I have to do? Is there a discount on my premium if I do this work?
Right.
That would be a huge incentive. But out of our hands, just something we'd like to understand more, and hopefully the industry would understand that too.
Well, out of all of our hands, but hopefully that's where networking can do some good work.
That's right.
Different.
There's a
industry
conversation. There is a conversation I know that's happening because it's impacting a lot of people in mountain communities.
Yeah, and there's a lot of legislation being proposed to try to remedy it, and you can't legislate your way out of this problem.
Yeah, true.
I think Lawrence has his hand up.
Lawrence?
Yes, thank you. In addition to that, we are moving into a holiday weekend, so we are making sure that people have the information that they need to know before they go recreate responsibly. There's a fire prevention campaign that we're going to be utilizing. For this fire, specifically the fire investigation post that we issued a couple of days ago, by tomorrow will have been viewed by 1 million people. And we've received some really good leads that we passed on to the lead fire investigator. And based on all of those views and all of those comments, it tells us 3 things. One, people have taken the opportunity to politicize this, and I won't go there. But before that, these places are important to people, and they're policing each other and encouraging people to do the right thing. And other groups like the 14er groups and other outdoor recreation groups are amplifying those messages as well. So as you see those fire prevention messages come across our social platforms, please amplify them, especially this weekend, because it is going to be the last hurrah per se of summer 2025. And on our forest alone, 3 times in a row across the national forest, the recreation management page on the PSICC has been the most visited page across the entire country, 3 times in a row. So we know that folks are making plans to come here, and we need to ensure that they're informed and they recreate responsibly.
Lawrence, is that different from other years? Like, is this a spike in 2025, or is it because leaf peeping season is coming up? It's the last chance to get into the high country. Is that new?
The statistics were for the summer. And this is something that we're now tracking differently because we moved into a new website. So
Okay.
we'll have more statistics for the fall, but the peak that we've seen have been for May, June, and July.
Oh, you're saying monthly, we are the highest, not like 3
Yes.
days,
No,
3 months.
no, the last 3 months, the Pike and San Isabel recreation management page has been the most visited page in the entire Forest Service system.
Got it. And am I also understanding you that you're saying that this is a new website and this is the first year we actually have data on this, so we can't compare it to previous years?
We can. I can do that if you're interested in those numbers. It's just more easily accessible this year because of the new system.
Cool, thanks. I'm just trying to understand trends, that's all.
Those are important.
Yeah, thanks.
Lastly, I would say something before I forget. And I know we're past time for meeting set time, but with the recreation in mind, while also trying to account for firefighter and public safety, there's some closures in effect right now. I'm currently reviewing those closures right now. It's basically La Plata Trail to the summit. I anticipate that staying closed because we still have a fire going on up there. 391 is the road that sort of goes into Peekaboo, Sayers, McNassar, that area. That's currently closed. I'm reviewing that because it does, it's recreation opportunities. It's Labor Day weekend. The south approach to La Plata is also closed, but
Like through Winfield?
yes.
Yeah.
And I'm reviewing that one too. So my hope is that we can provide for firefighter and public safety while also providing the public recreational opportunity this weekend in the absence of closures in certain places. So I hope the conditions all support that. And yeah, so stay tuned.
Oh, thank you.
There's hunting season coming up too. And like everybody's got their thing out there, right? They just want to go where they love to be.
You gotta just do what you need to do. Don't worry about
Well,
it.
if you get asked about it, it's not like, oh, they're just keeping it closed. Well, it's for a reason,
Yeah.
but we don't want to do it any longer than we have to.
Absolutely. I have to say, I'm very impressed with all of you, all of your expertise, all of your work. I really appreciate your time coming over and giving us your time. Our time is absolutely yours.
Yeah.
Yeah, anytime.
And yeah, we're still, it's our first fire, so, we're.
Ours our second fire.
Well,
Hey,
it was
Dan.
such a little baby.
Dan's
tiny
here,
fire.
don't say
Could
that.
have been a big one.
Good, you're right.
Their first Forest Service fire.
Yes, so, we're figuring, we're learning our roles and, where we can help and where to step back and, so just, thanks for being here and, guiding us through this.
Absolutely. And if you have questions, reach out. Don't hesitate, please. As you know, we've got other people on the call that like to talk fire too.
Yeah.
And, others in this room, and yeah, happy to share what we know, and go from there and we can all learn together.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wanted to chime in before we wrap this up?
I might just add too that when your constituents are asking questions, I think it can't be lost on the fact that fire's not a bad thing. Now conditions can dictate that, and these guys might be like, hold on a minute, but the landscape 100% needs fire, and quite honestly, some of these fires that we're seeing, and it's not just here but across the state, across the nation for that, is that when we see 100 years without the landscape seeing fire, it builds that fuel load to such a capacity that we're seeing these real catastrophes. And so a fire like this really builds a nice area in there that when we get it out, that if another fire comes, there is a stopping point where if the fire burns to it, we've seen how prior fire scars will really throw the brakes on a current fire. So that's something also that you can, cautiously, we're not begging for fire and we're not trying to start them necessarily, but there is benefit to it. And so as long as it's done, and if we can, we can get a fire and then we can get some nice rain, it really provides a great opportunity as well. And so, we really try to push that too from a state perspective, because this is a trend now. We're seeing really big fires. I mean, all you have to do is look to the western slope right now, and that half that country's on fire. And so that's just another point that it can be a positive. It really can.
I think about your comment all the time when I go into the woods on trails these days and I see how much timber we have down laying around.
It's like, oh gosh, this needs to burn before it burns.
Before it really burns.
So it really does limit some recreation because the timber and the fuels are so heavy and there's so much down. And I mean, I'm a horseback rider in the mountains, and we literally have to take saws with us now because we've ridden in and then we come out and there's down, and now the trail's blocked and we have to cut our way out. So, or in, vice versa. But yeah, it's a balance.
I'm assuming that's part of the management of a fire these days, is to understand where it can healthily burn versus where you have to protect assets? Or is it actually the policy of the Forest Service to fully stop a fire no matter what?
We are in full suppression mode. That doesn't mean that full suppression is you're directly on the fire line.
Right.
So when we say full suppression mode, it's where can we safely
Okay.
engage a fire.
Okay.
In between there and wherever that fire front is,
Mhm.
there may be some beneficial fire effects. That's not what we're managing
It's
for.
secondary for what you're managing. Got it.
Secondary, yeah. First is suppression. And that's where we're at right now. Where we do have the opportunity is with prescribed fire.
Yeah.
And hearing Shannon talk about what fire can do beneficially. If you go out, there's a story to be told. You may have heard about it, as we were telling the Interlochen story last year about the Flume Creek fire. That was 2018, if I'm not mistaken. That was prescribed fire, and it wasn't hugely popular at the time. However, fast forward a few years, in 2024, Interlochen happened, and when the fire was moving across the landscape from Interlochen, it ran into Flume Creek fire and basically laid down.
Yeah, totally.
So there's different factors out there. And if you look at the habitat too, I mean, even some places in Interlochen where it burned sort of low to moderate severity, if you call it, there's a huge flush of grass and forbs and aspen.
Right.
We didn't plan that, but you can see some of those same effects in the prescribed fire right next door too.
Mm-hmm.
So it just depends on the intensity of things.
Yeah.
And probably better that we take the initiative on those than have nature dictated to us.
I'm sure there are a lot of folks that get nervous with those prescribed burns.
Certainly.
In
Yeah.
terms of not.
There's a certain level of
see those.
social acceptance that goes along with that you try to build over time.
All right, thanks, y'all.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you all for this one.
Very well. That's what we do.
Cool. All right. Well, with that, let's conclude this work session. Thank you, everyone, for everything. This has been educational, awesome, and
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.